Welcome everybody to the Getting Started with Automation in Jira webinar. My name is John and I'm joined by Andreas there with his sunny background. Might just take this opportunity to welcome everybody as you're settling in. I know these are strange times with coronavirus going around, so I hope everybody is doing well and staying healthy. You'll also notice that Andreas and I are working remotely, trying to keep my messy bedroom behind me, hidden by my shoulders. So if there are any dodgy audio issues as we go through, apologies. Hopefully you can forgive us this time around. I'm going to get kicked off. I've already introduced myself as John. I'm Irish living in Australia. I'm the product marketing manager for automation in Atlassian, but formerly was with CodeBarrel, which is the company that Andreas set up and created automation for Jira. So it might be a good segue to throw it over to you, Andreas, to say hello.
Hey everyone, I'm Andreas. I'm actually a long-term Atlassian. So before we started CodeBarrel, I worked at Atlassian for almost 10 years. And then about 3.5 years ago, I guess myself and Nick, my co-founder, decided to start our own company. And that's really where we came up with this idea for automation in Jira, with the thought that we could provide something that would add a lot more power on top of Jira, but also automate away a lot of the manual tasks in Jira. And so that really took off, was really quite a great success in the marketplace. And then a couple of months ago, we came full circle, returned to Atlassian, and we've now had the opportunity to scale up automation to all of Jira, which has been an amazing growth journey, I guess. And I'll hand back to John now so that he can introduce the product to you.
Thanks, Andreas. So before we dig into the product itself, I want to get to the app that the slide that everybody's most excited about, which is housekeeping. So just wanted to say, obviously there's a Q&A widget there in front of you. Please do ask questions. We love good questions and we have lots of time at the end to answer those. So please do put your questions through. Also, I'll be referring to different resources throughout the webinar, such as we've got an advanced automation webinar coming up soon. We've got an automation guide, things like that. I have links for all of that in the console in front of you as well, and I'll also email it to you afterwards, so you don't need to sort of Google and search around for that. And lastly, if you zone out at any stage because of my monotone Irish voice, don't worry. We can send you a recording of the webinar after, and you can catch up on everything then. And that's the housekeeping done. So moving on, I think it's a really good thing to do to just take a little step back before we go into this automation engine and ask yourself, why are we automating at all? Keep in mind, in this webinar, we have probably quite a mixed bag of people who are attending. So we've got those maybe who already use this automation engine and are just getting a bit of a refresher. Might have those who are automating through different means, like hitting the API directly or writing scripts. Or there might be those who've never automated before. So the obvious reason that people automate is because it saves time. So that's the easy one. The use cases that we're going to go through today will save you minutes, hours, hundreds of hours over your work year. And it just gives you that time back so you can focus on what's important and what you enjoy as well, the higher level stuff. Second, it supercharges Jira. So I know that's a bit of a cliche thing to say, but it's actually true. So Jira is already known for its extensive power, and automation just takes that to a completely new level. It allows you to do things in Jira that you couldn't do before. And the best way to show you is in the live demo that Andreas is going to do. Lastly, it's no code. So that's exactly what it sounds like. You don't need to be a developer. You don't need to write scripts. It's just point and click, drag and drop. And maybe the best way to sort of explain that to you is by my experience. So when I joined up with CodeBarrel and Automation for Jira, I didn't necessarily have a technical background. I certainly wasn't a developer, and I didn't even know what Jira was. Sorry, Atlassian. But I very quickly was able to create my own automation rules. In fact, within a month, I was doing customer support along with all of the engineers. So that gives you an idea. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So the other thing that automation is particularly good for is keeping your tools in sync, your third-party tools, that is. So Jira has always been the central source of truth for our customers. And again, automation just makes this so much easier and smoother. It actually helps you sleep at night, unless, like me, you've got 2 small kids. So you can actually automate all of your processes across third-party tools like Microsoft Teams, Bitbucket, Slack, Twilio. We already integrate with lots of tools, and there's a lot more coming. To give you a bit of an example of how this might look, you might have an automation rule that kicks off whenever a PR request is merged in Bitbucket. Then you want to transition an issue in Jira, update a certain field, and then send a Slack message to your whole team to let them know. So, the idea is that you can stay working in context. Jira is always at the center, and automation is the brain that powers all of that. Sorry for the slightly gruesome metaphor, but that's how it works. Now, obviously, Andreas built this software along with Nick, so he's biased, and I've been working with the automation team for a long time. So, of course, we're going to say how great this feature is. To prove it, we did a survey of all our existing customers, and we got hundreds of responses back. And these are just some of the stats that came out from that. So 97% say that it saves them time, 94% say that it makes life easier, and 87% say it helps scale Jira. Now, today in the rules that we're going to be running through, the idea is that we are going to give you the building blocks that'll teach you how to create your own rules. So while you can absolutely run off with these templates and use them immediately, we want to teach you how to fish rather than giving you delicious sushi. Again, another strange metaphor. But by the end of it, you're going to have complete value across these three pillars as well. You'll be saving time, your life will be easier, and as your company grows and scales, so will Jira, without the need for extra human power and without the need for extra hours. So I wanted to show you at a human level what that means. And David Yu is the Lyft admin, and he's a longtime customer of automation. He was kind enough to let me include this quote in our presentation today. I actually met David at the San Francisco Atlassian user group a few months ago, and sat down, and he showed me some of the ways he was using automation, and it was really, really exciting. And I brought it back to the team, and they were pumped to see that as well, how smart he was using it. So I think it's just nice to sort of show the kind of value that a human is getting, rather than just giving the numbers as well. So, as promised in my emails, this is not going to be death by PowerPoint. You're probably the same as me, that the best way to learn is by actually seeing the tool, not by having someone talking about it. So I'm going to hand it over to Andreas in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to finish off with this one slide, which seems fitting because this is the slide that Andreas showed me on my first day with the company, which probably explains the 1980s GIF of Lego blocks that you see there. So when I asked, how does automation work? How does this engine work? He said, it's just like Lego blocks or building blocks. All you do is take these blocks and put them together in different ways to craft your automation rules. So for us, the first building block is going to be the trigger. So that's what kicks off the rule, listens for an event in Jira, and then we move onwards. Secondly, we're going to add a condition, and the condition is just what refines the rule. Simple as that. It adds power and it refines. And then lastly, we have our action. That's what executes the rule. So we've got tons of actions to choose from. One thing to call out with automation in Jira is that it isn't like there's 100 use cases it solves. It's practically limitless. Now, these are the basic building blocks that you put together. It is more complex than that, but at a basic level, this is how we're going to be combining these building blocks to create rules today. And Andreas is going to show you that in the demos. So the 4 rules that Andreas is going to run through are there in front of you. Again, I've posted all of these already in the community and included a link, so you can go in there and see them and steal them and adapt them and ask questions and have conversations about them. But let's actually go in now to a live demo and see how the Australian internet does for Andreas as he kicks off.
Cool, thanks for that, John. So I'm going to jump across to my live demo here and actually show you 4 different automation rules today. And we're going to start off with some fairly simple use cases, and then get more and more advanced as the demo goes along. And I'll try to introduce new building blocks as we go. Once again, hopefully, as John mentioned, my internet will not fall over during this, but it is Australia, so I can't guarantee anything. So first of all, how do we actually find automation for Jira? So I'm currently here in my demo instance. So this is just a standard Jira Cloud installation. with Jira Software and Jira Service Desk loaded. And I'm currently in a software project here. And right now I'm on my Kanban board in this software project. So to start automating in this project, all you have to do is navigate to the project settings and then locate this project automation admin section here. And that's really where all the automation rules for this project are created. We also have a global admin section available that I'll show you a little bit later in this demo. But this is really the first step that you should take as a project administrator. We're currently, we know this is not super easy to find at the moment, so we're kind of exploring ways at the moment to make this a bit more discoverable, so just bear with us on that front. Okay, so let's actually jump into the demo and create our first automation rule. So for this first rule that we're going to create today, we're going to tackle a really simple use case, which is adding a number of subtasks to an issue that's just been created. So the first thing we need to do is jump into our rule builder here by clicking through to this create rule action. And then we get to pick our first building block that John just introduced. So we need to pick a trigger for this rule. And with triggers, there's a lot of different choices available. So there's all the typical issue actions available. So we can run this rule when an issue is created or commented or transitioned. We can also run this rule when field values change. So for example, if the priority increases on an issue. And we have some more advanced triggers again. So things like that are software specific, for example, like when a sprint is completed or when a version's just been released. Or we could run a rule on a scheduled basis, which I'll show you in the last example of this demo. But for now, for this rule, we simply want to kick off when an issue's been created. So I can just pick this issue created trigger, and with this trigger, it's really easy. There's no extra configuration required. I can just save this, and now we can add our next building block to this rule. So with this rule, I'm going to add a condition. And with conditions, again, there's quite a bit of choice available. So we have a very simple to use issue fields condition, which I'll show you in a second. But you can also do more advanced things like run user conditions. For example, if you wanted to check if the reporter is part of a particular group, or we could run a JQL condition that checks if this issue that was created matches certain JQL query. So if you really want very fine-grained control about which issues this rule would run for. But for this example, let's just pick the issue field condition. And right now, all we want to check is that the issue type is a task. So only when a task is created do we want to create subtasks. And by the way, as I'm creating this rule and adding these components on the right, you always get a nice little summary as you go on the left-hand side here of what this rule does. So already we can see that this rule will run when an issue is being created and only if the issue type is a task. Okay, so now that we've created our or added our condition, we can now go ahead and add our first action. And with actions, there is also a lot of choice available. So again, we have all the different issue operations. So you can assign issues, you can comment on issues, you can transition them, you can edit them. You can also create new issues in other projects or in the same project. We also have a bunch of third-party integrations. So you can send emails, or you could send a Teams or a Slack message, for example. You can even send outgoing web requests. So if you have some kind of third-party API or third-party system in your organization, then you could use an automation rule to send a web request to that system with some data from this issue that was just created. But for this example, all we want to do is actually create some subtasks. So we have a create subtasks action specifically for this use case. And we can just simply go ahead and add 3 subtasks to this new issue that was created. So right now, all this is doing is adding these 3 subtasks with these 3 summaries. One more thing I want to show you is that we have a more powerful way to create issues, which will allow you to add additional fields. So I can simply click this add fields button here, which now converted this 3rd subtask to our full-blown create issue action, which actually allows you to create the issue with pretty much any field set in your Jira instance. So for example, I can set a description on this newly created subtask, and I can also add some labels immediately on creation. And with create issue, you can actually also create issues in other projects, but I'll cover off what you can do within a single project and multi-project rules a little bit later with another example in this demo. But that's pretty much it. That's all we want to do with this rule. So let's just go ahead and give this rule a name, and then we can turn it on and actually try it out. So let's jump back to our Kanban board in this project. And let's go ahead and create a new project of the correct type. So I'm going to pick a task here and enter a summary for this task. And let's go ahead and create this. So now if I jump back to my automation rule and we look at the audit log for this rule, we should in fact see an execution for this already. So the audit log always tells you all the different actions the rule's taken, and it also tells you when a rule was edited. And I can actually dive into this successful execution here, and it gives me full details about which issue triggered this rule, tells me that the issue condition that we've created here passed, and then it actually tells me all the subtasks and issues that were created as part of this. And so if I come back to our Agile board here, you can see that these 3 subtasks have been created automatically, just the way I defined it in the rule. So a very, this was very quick and easy to create this rule, but it actually solves quite a complex use case. And it's already like something that would save you quite a lot of time if you're often creating issues with the same set of subtasks, which is quite a common use case for Jira. All right, let's jump ahead to our next example. So for this next rule that I'm going to create, we're going to look at a slightly more advanced way that you can use conditions in a rule. And in particular, the use case that we're going to try to solve is automatically assigning issues when they're created based on some criteria. So the example that I'm going to use is when issues of different types are created, I want to assign it to specific users. So let's jump in again and pick our trigger as our first building block for this rule. So I'm going to pick the issue created trigger again, because once again, we want to run this rule when an issue is created. We want to assign it immediately after creation. Next, we need to pick a condition again. But this time I'm going to use this special type of if-else block condition here, which allows us to do some branching in this rule, depending on which condition matches. So with our first if block, I can add any type of condition again. So we're going to use an issue field condition again, very similar to our first rule, and check that if this is a task, then let's assign this issue to a specific user. So perhaps if it's a task, let's assign this issue to John. And once again, if you look at the summary on the left here, it gives you a nice little overview of what is exactly going to happen with this rule. So that's our first if condition done. But what if I want to do something else for bugs? Maybe we have a particular person in our team that's our bug master, and any bug should be assigned to them. So I can add another else if block here that will check, okay, if it's not a task, then if it's a bug, let's go ahead and assign that issue perhaps to myself, because I'm the bug master this week. And now finally, if it's not one of either of these issue types, maybe we want to add a condition that then just assigns it to a group of people that I've predefined in this rule. So we can add an else block here, and then simply add an assign issue action, which I can specify with a more advanced way of assigning. So one thing you'll notice in these actions in automation for Jira is that quite often we've added quite a bit of power on top of the basic Jira function. So in Jira, normally when you assign issues, you can only assign them to individual users. But what I can do here is actually assign this issue to a list of users. So I've picked myself, John, and Nick here with the balanced workload algorithm. And what this basically means is that when an issue is created that falls into this block in this rule, automation will check how many issues do the three of us have assigned to each other, have assigned to us at the moment, and then basically pick the person with the least number of issues assigned to them currently and assign that issue to them so that we get a nice balanced workload across these three folks in our team. So let me go ahead and save this rule and try it out. Okay, so let's come back to our board here and create a new issue. And so first, let's create another task here, which should get assigned to John. So again, I can jump back to the rule, look at our audit log. We can see our first execution here. We can see that it matched the first if block, and then we assigned this to a user. And in fact, if I come back to the board now, you can see that John has been picked as the assignee already. But what if I now create an issue of another type? So let's say we create an epic here, which should fall into the balanced assign method. So if I reload this rule audit log again, we can see another execution now. And we can see here that we fell into the else block this time, and it should have now assigned this issue using our balanced algorithm. And in fact, this time it picked Nick from that list of users and assigned it to them. So again, all we've done here is really just combined the different building blocks that we have available in automation in a slightly different way, but we've solved actually quite a complex use case within Jira. We're conditionally assigning issues and then even assigning issues that don't match anything using a balanced workload given a list of users. So this is something that could actually be quite useful in a support kind of point of view, where you want to maybe assign new support cases from customers to members of your team in a balanced workload. Okay, one last thing that I want to show you with this rule is that currently this rule is only running in this software playground project that we're in. But what if you wanted to reuse this logic, or what if you wanted to use this across all of your software projects? Or maybe you want to use it both in your software and your service desk project because you have the same teams working on two projects. Well, luckily with automation, you can very easily reuse automation rules across projects and even globally in Jira. So I can just jump into the global admin section of this Jira instance and then navigate to the auto assign new issues rule that we've just created. And now as a global administrator, I can actually modify the scope of this rule. So right now it's defined as a single project rule in our software playground project. But I can actually, as a global administrator, change this to be a global rule that runs in all projects, or I could set it as a multi-project rule that runs perhaps just in these two projects that I've picked now. And finally, I could even set this up so it runs in any software project or any service desk project. So this is a really, really powerful way to quickly reuse this automation rule logic across your teams and across your projects. So it really saves you a lot of time. You don't have to recreate these automation rules over and over again. Okay, so let's jump back to our project admin section and let's jump into our next automation rule. So again, we're going to get a little bit more, show you a slightly more complex use case with this next automation rule. So one thing that's really a powerful concept in Jira is that no issue really exists in isolation. So there's a lot of different ways to represent issue relationships in Jira. So you can have issues linked to each other where one issue causes another issue, or you can have parent subtask relationships, or in a software context, you could have epic and story relationships. And one thing you can do with automation for Jira is you can actually define automation rules that perform actions on these related issues. And that's a really powerful concept that allows you to do a lot more with Jira in an automatic way. So let's take a look at another example rule that will help you keep your epics and stories in sync in a software context. So one thing that quite often happens in a software project is that an epic might get closed off before all the stories have finished because maybe a product manager has decided that we no longer need this epic. But then what happens quite often is that those stories are forgotten and they don't get closed off automatically. So with automation, you can now automatically close all the stories in that epic. And I'm going to show you how you can implement a rule like this very quickly. So let's go ahead and create a new rule here. And this time we're going to pick a new trigger type. So we're going to run this rule when an issue is transitioned to done. So with this configuration here, you can very quickly set up a rule so that only certain workflow transitions will get picked up. In this case, we want to check that an epic is in fact moved to done. So again, we're going to add an issue field condition here that this time checks that the issue type is an epic. And now we can introduce this new, more powerful building block that we haven't looked at yet up until now, which is this branch rule related issues component. So with this, you can perform actions on many different types of related issues. So we can do things with subtasks. So if the trigger issue over here was a parent issue and had subtasks, you could perform actions on the subtasks. Or if the trigger issue was in fact a subtask itself, you could navigate up to the parent. In our example here, we're going to use stories. So our trigger issue is an epic, and with this option, we can then perform actions on all the stories. You can also do things with linked issues, for example, or if you want full control over what the related issues are, you can even search for them with a custom JQL search. So this is a really flexible and powerful way to find related issues to the one that triggered off this automation rule. But for now, let's pick our stories here and go ahead and add a condition now on this related issue branch. So we can now perform conditional or condition checks on the stories that are related to the trigger issue as well. So again, I'm going to pick our issue field condition here and basically ensure that we only run our actions for stories that are not currently done. And then finally, we can transition those issues to the same status as the trigger issue. So just to go over this rule again, when an issue is transitioned to done, if it's an epic, then we're going to navigate to all the stories in that epic. And if those stories are not done yet, then we're going to transition those stories to done, which is the same status as our trigger issue. So let's give this a name and try this out. So I'm going to reuse the same epic that we created before. So let's go ahead and create a bunch of stories in this epic. And right now, this is currently not done yet. So we're in the backlog status here in our workflow, and none of these stories are currently done. So let's go ahead and actually transition this epic to done. So now, if I jump back to our audit log for this rule, you can see that there's already been a successful execution. And we can see again the issue that triggered this. We can see all the stories that we found in this epic, and then the fact that we transitioned all of them to done. And if I come back to our board here, you can see that not just the epic's been moved to done now, but also the 3 stories that I just created have been automatically moved across to done by this automation rule. So again, quite a powerful rule that we've built here, but it was very easy to create this, and it's definitely a massive time saver that you can use in pretty much any project or any scenario where you have related issues that you want to keep up to date in Jira. Okay, so let's jump into our last rule here. And this is by far the most complex example I'm going to show today, but it also solves a very common use case that we see. So I'm going to create a rule next that will basically look for issues that are overdue, that have been stuck in a blocked status for quite a long time, and show you how you can use an automation rule to escalate those types of issues. So let's go ahead and create this rule. And for this rule, we're going to use the schedule trigger, which I showed you earlier. So with a schedule trigger, we can set up a rule that runs on a regular interval. So we can either schedule this to run every day, or perhaps once a week, or perhaps once a month, or we could even set a specific time of day with a cron expression. So you could schedule this to run at 9 a.m. every weekday. And then in this trigger, we can also configure which issues this rule should run for. So I can basically define some custom JQL here that will look for any issue that's currently blocked and hasn't been updated for more than 5 days. So this is some JQL that you can very easily try out in the issue navigator to find just the right issues that you need. Gives you very detailed access to all the right information and issues that you want to automate. And then we can go ahead and actually perform some actions on those issues. So in this scenario, probably the first thing we want to do is actually transition these issues that have been blocked for quite a long time into a new status in our workflow. So I can actually move this from blocked to escalated to the dev team. And hopefully that means that our whole dev team can now see these in a new column on their Agile board, and some people will actually start looking at these issues as with a bit more priority and hopefully action them soon. The next thing we should probably do as well is, if an issue's been blocked and no one's really looked at it for 5 days, we should probably tell the reporter of that issue that, you know, it's something we're aware of and we're going to look at this very soon. So I can simply add a comment here to this, to any of these blocked issues with our comment issue action. Now this comment body here includes a slightly more advanced concept that I haven't introduced yet, and that is our smart values. So with smart values, so anything that's surrounded by these double curly braces, you can basically access any amount of information from the issue that this rule is running for. So in this case, we're accessing the reporter of the issue that's been blocked. We get the full name of that reporter, separate first and last name, and then we just display the first name here. So that's a pretty complex example, but you can also do simpler stuff like accessing the issue key, or perhaps you just want to include the issue description in this comment as well. And you can access any field, whether that's a system field or custom field in Jira, with smart values. So this is a fairly complex use case, but we do have very detailed docs around which smart values are available. And we're also going to run a more detailed webinar in future that will explain how smart values work pretty soon. Okay, so now that we have a comment here for the reporter, probably the only thing that we want to do is actually send our development team a notification, just to really make sure that they are going to look at this soon. So we can use our send Slack message action here and basically add a message for our development team that will get sent to the right Slack channel and tell them, using another smart value, that this particular issue that we found that was blocked should be actioned. And that should really make sure that none of these issues fall through the cracks, and that someone from our dev team will really look at this. So that's really it for this rule. So again, we just need to give it a name and turn it on. Now, because this is a bit of a time-based rule, it's a bit hard to demo this in a live demo. But trust me, this is something that we use extensively ourselves. So we definitely use this in a support context as well. So we have rules like this set up that will automatically ask customers for more information if they basically don't reply to us in a support case for more than a week or more than a certain amount of time. And this really makes sure that none of these support cases fall through the cracks. But it can also be useful in a software context for blocked issues that might be blocked on external dependencies and things like that. Okay, so I hope with these 4 rules, you've kind of gotten a glimpse of the power that's available with automation for Jira and with all the different building blocks that we have that you can put together to solve all these different use cases. One last thing that you might be wondering about is, how do we actually see kind of the value that these rules are providing? How can we see that these rules are actually running on my Jira instance? Well, luckily for that, we actually built a feature that gives you insights about how often these rules execute, how much time they're really saving your team. So I'm going to jump across to another Jira instance here. So this is actually our own production Jira instance that we use for development of the automation feature in Jira. And through this dot 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 menu, we can jump into this performance insights feature. And this basically lets you look at how many automation rules are running across different timeframes. So I can look at the last 24 hours, last week, or the current month even. And what we see here is that you can see how many rules executed, how many of them successfully performed some actions. It will also show us if there's any rules that are currently running with errors. And then in this table down the bottom here, you can actually dig in even further and see the detailed rules that are running, how often they execute, and how many times they were successful or how many times they were run without any actions. So it gives you really great insights into what rules are giving your teams the most benefit, and might show you as well which rules you might want to duplicate and use in more than just one project, or that you want to use for more than just one team. All right, so that's it for the live demo today. So I might hand back to John now to wrap things up, and then we should have plenty of time for questions at the end of this webinar. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much for that, Andreas. Great to see the internet just about held up. I hope everybody saw real value in that live demo. And if you have any questions, do fire them through. We'll get to them in a couple of minutes now. Just wanted to run over a few last things, which I think are going to be really interesting and valuable for you guys as well. So starting off with these 5 new triggers that we've just rolled out. They all live in the DevOps world. And these ones that I'm showing you at the moment are integrated with Bitbucket. So whenever your branch is created or commit is pushed, pull request is merged, pull request is created, or pull request declined, you can kick off a rule based on any of these triggers. It means you don't have to jump between tools, just stay working in Jira within the context you want, no code, which is beautiful. And if you don't use Bitbucket, which I'm sure lots of people out there are saying this looks great, but I don't use Bitbucket, don't worry, we're actually rolling this out for GitHub, GitLab, and basically anything else with the word Git in it as well over the next few weeks. So this is going to be super valuable, and I think you'll really enjoy them. So Andreas did talk a little bit about the difference between single project and multi-project and global rules. And I just wanted to sort of touch on that a little bit more. So if you're using automation at any reasonable scale, you probably want to be using the global and multi-project rules to automate your tasks and workflows across the entire organization and as many Jira projects as you need. So to do that, you'd probably want to be working in the Jira Premium plan because you have more access to them there. So just to clarify, every single person has access to automation in Jira Cloud. Everybody has unlimited single project rule executions, which is great. There are some limits when you get into the global and multi-project automation. So for free, that's 100 per month. Standard, that's 500 per month. And premium, that's 1,000 executions per user per month. Or to put that in context, if you have 200 users in premium, you'll have 200,000 global or multi-project rules that you can use every month. And that's pooled as well. So across users, across products. If you wanted to do it across Jira Service Desk, that's fine as well. And ticking on as well, just to take a little bit of a pause to give a refresher of all of the value that we are including in Jira Software Premium. I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. So just quickly, I'll just run through what is on offer in there. So at the moment, aside from having that access to the global and multi-project rule executions at scale, we also have 99.9% uptime SLA, so you don't have to worry about unplanned downtime. You've got unlimited storage, so never have to think about attachment sizes or limits ever again. 24/7 premium support with a 1-hour response time for critical issues, so you'll always have the support you need around the clock. No stresses there. So that's just some of the stuff that we have at the moment, but also coming soon is pretty exciting. So we've got project archiving, so you can show your team access. Basically, you can show everything your team accesses in Jira is 100% up to date. So automation will help with that, but archiving will also take it to the next level. You'll have admin insights, which will be helpful for understanding how many people in your business are using Jira on the day-to-day, so you can make sure you're getting full value. IP allow listing, which allows you to add extra security to your instance by only allowing people from certain IPs to access your site. and one that I love as well, which is we're adding a sandbox environment so you can test changes. So those changes could be new automation rules, so you can do them in your sandbox before going into your live instance. You could also download apps from the marketplace, safe in the knowledge that's just in a sandbox. Basically do whatever you want with it, as is the idea with sandboxes. Maybe the one that I'm most excited about, simply because I know many automation customers are also using roadmaps, and they've talked to me a lot about this, is our new advanced roadmaps feature. So this enables people to build multi-team, multi-project roadmaps right within Jira. So it allows you to track dependencies across teams and projects, as well as track capacity at the team level, so you can make appropriate adjustments to deliver on your plans. So if that does sound like something you might be interested in, it's probably a good chance to call out that my colleague Josh, who's a great presenter actually, is going to be running a webinar on advanced roadmaps. So you'll see that link in front of you in the console, and I'll also email that to you guys after too. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about Jira Software Premium, you can click on the banner that you see below you there in the webinar, or equally just go to atlassian.com/premium. And lastly, I also mentioned a couple of times that we'll be running some more webinars. This was an introductory webinar to automation to give you those basic tools you needed to start building rules. But we really have so much more to go over, everything from smart values to using long if-else rules, and tons more. So I'm going to be emailing all of that information and that invitation to you guys as well in the coming weeks. Okay, so with that, I think we'll take a little pause. It's time for questions and answers. Hopefully there are lots, because I spent a lot of time putting this animation together. So please fire them through, any last questions, and Andreas and I will start answering them now.